Do you freak out at the thought of an online interview? Well, you are not alone. And today we're going to take you through my top 5 steps so you can be more confident and comfortable in rocking that online interview. Step 1 in rocking your online interview is research. You need to know all the basics like you would in a normal job interview. You need to know what the essential criteria are and what the desirable criteria are. You need to know all about the organisation, and you need to know all about the panellists. Even when you're meeting with them online, it's really important to understand who they are and get a picture of them. Sometimes the layout can be a video conference format, and they'll be very far away from the camera, maybe in the office around a board table. It can be very hard for you to know who's who in the zoo if you haven't had a picture of them in your head before, and that can help you feel more comfortable and help you direct the conversation. Understanding the panelists is really key, and if they don't provide you with that information when you've applied for the role and have been shortlisted for interview, make sure you ask. It's a very common thing to do and they won't be offended. Research is one of my fundamentals for online interviews and any interviews for that matter. I like to focus on what is the role, what is the department, what is the organisation, and what is happening at an industry-wide level. If you're thinking of the kind of hairy questions that you can be asked, often having a strong understanding of the department and what's happening at that level, and having a strong understanding of the industry and what is happening to impact that industry in terms of the trends going forward, it's really important. For example, I had someone a couple of years ago going for a government role, and they were looking at the Department of Agriculture. And one of the things Australia was struggling with at the time was a drought, and the question in interview was a written response prior to interview, which involved that person sitting down and thinking about the policies and the way that they'd roll out a response to this particular situation. So industry issues and what's happening makes you feel like you're on the pulse of the industry and able to talk confidently about that. Like any interview, you do have to consider what you wear. It's really important to think about what you're wanting to display to the employer through what you're wearing. Often it's the message you're sending them. So if in doubt, do overdress rather than underdress, but you have to understand the culture of the organisation. If you're going for a job in a startup, they might ordinarily wear t-shirts. If you go dressed in a suit, you might look a little bit out of place, and their assumption may be that you just don't get it. So thinking about maybe dressing it up a little more with a polo, or if you are choosing a particular type of dress, or to dress in a certain way that aligns with their culture, make sure you tell them. Your lighting is an important part, which you may underestimate in an interview. I know that I have fluoros here, and at night, if I was doing an interview, it would be extremely poor lighting, and I'd probably like to bring in another couple of lights. So for this type of production, for me talking to you, I actually have 3 lights. I have a really large light up here, which is providing some front light. I've got sunlight coming in from the window, and I've got a backlight, which I have just as a little bedroom light that's shining a light towards the back of my head, sort of highlighting the colour of my hair. These are just some tricks that videographers use that you may also like to use in your interview to sort of make yourself shine a little bit and take you out of the shadows. Check in with the lighting. Check that you've done a little run through first at the particular time of day of your interview, because this can be the trick, especially if there's other weather conditions like a storm or something. If you're in a really dark, dingy part of the house, it will be hard to see you. But again, if you are behind a window behind you, there will be really strong light coming in and it will be hard to see you. If you like to use a virtual background, then sometimes the way that the light is positioned will also affect that background as well. So test in situation at the time that your interview is proposed to give yourself the best chance of looking professional on the big day. Now, the employer can see your background. Again, I'm encouraging you to test it out before the big day. What is in the background of your shot? Is there a door open with a towel hanging over the top of the door? Is there anything that is out of character as to what you are trying to say to the employer. Make sure everything is aligned, including that background, including random things that you can see. Maybe it's a mirror reflecting something else, but you don't want them to see that. Really look at these things in detail, because they are little clues that you can give away that you want to reduce and make sure it's completely aligned and you have full control of that process. If you are using an office desk, make sure it's neat and tidy. You could even stack a range of books that may be industry related, maybe something particularly relevant, or a new book. You might even refer to it in interview. So all of these things can be handy and be available to you. Don't forget to test your tech and research in detail how it's going to work on the day. About 12 months ago, I went for a job at Amazon for AWS, and I was shortlisted for interview. So as part of that, I had to download something called Chime. I've never heard of it before, and I've used Zoom, Skype, Google Hangouts, all of these I'm familiar with. But Chime just made things a little bit scary because I hadn't used it before. So I did take their instructions and I downloaded it before, made the interview run a lot more smoothly. You want to make sure you've disappeared all your distractions. So things like your pets and your children, you need to have them supervised at the time of your interview. I don't know if you remember that BBC clip of the kids squiggling in when it came to the dad's big interview on TV. But that's the sort of thing that can distract you in a big interview. You need to have time and focus. It's enough pressure as it is without having to juggle a little cat coming across your computer or a dog licking your leg or something like that. So really try to minimize any types of distractions. That also includes things like alarms, particularly if you're in a room that has those sort of things. Your phone, making sure that it's switched off on a particular mode to make sure you're not getting any notifications or vibrations. They can be distracting as well. And anything that you have maybe lying around. If you're in the kids' playroom, there might be some toys that can go off at random points, as we all know. So thinking about removing any of those distractions that may go off in an interview. One of the super awesome tricks that I love to use in an online interview is to place my laptop against a white wall, and in that way I actually am able to see some messages that I've stuck around the wall. So think of your interview as if you are the president going into an interview with one of the top journalists in your country. As a president, you know you have key messages, but that journalist is going to try and trip you up, they're going to try and take you off on tangents, and they're going to try to distract you from your key messages. Walk in there with your key messages and be strong about where they're going to be filtered through the questions that the employers are asking you. Act presidentially. I like to have those messages just as very brief notes stuck on walls around my laptop. So this is something you can refer to. You don't want them to be too distracting. So when you are looking off to the side or looking down to one side, it's going to distract the employer. This is also particularly important if it's an automated interview, and you need to be aware if this is part of the process, because an automated interview will actually register things like where your eye gaze is traveling, and maybe in that case it's not a great technique to use, because the eye gaze moving off to one side may indicate that you're not confident about answering the question, and you may also be making up something. Thinking about those online interviews, they also are addressing sentiment. So the tone of your voice and kind of like the performance metrics are also measured in that. So think about having that test run, and if you have quite a monotone voice, try to spice it up a bit with a couple of practices where you're putting emphasis on some keywords. There may be other documents like reports or other aspects that you'd like to share with the employer. It's not essential that you share them in an interview, but be prepared that you could, in demonstrating a question, share your screen and show them a snippet of that report. You can also follow up by sending them an email post-interview, thanking them for the opportunity to be interviewed, but also adding that extra document that you'd like to show them, and it demonstrates a particular aspect of the criteria that they were asking you about in the interview. All of these things take time and something you can reflect on prior to the interview. You're reflecting on your experience and maybe some demonstrations of the things that have really stood out in your career that can articulate to the employer the value that you bring. The key to this is comfort. And it's kind of an ironic thing to say that you would be comfortable in an interview. Not many people are. Some people are the very few people that thrive in an interview, possibly your extroverts of this world who love those situations to get out there in front of people and shine. It's not everyone. So as much as we can, we're going to try to research and understand everything about the interview, to practice and run through in a situation that the more and more we do it, the more comfortable we feel about it. Now, on the day, you will feel that rush of adrenaline. That's a good thing because it means that you're interested in this role, you want to try hard, and that body is responding appropriately to that. But with adrenaline comes things like a dry throat, maybe the heart rate's increased, so the speed of what you say is increasing. We need to be aware of how we respond in interviews and be able to adjust ourselves and find ways that calm us down. And this allows you to ground yourself in the present moment, because in interviews, what we often do is rush ahead. We're thinking of how to answer that question, what are they going to say, and we're thinking so much into the future that we just can't regulate where we are right now. So this can be some of the things that can help you relax. In the interview, make sure you have that bottle of water handy. And an online interview can be great because you can hide some of those nervous hands. But I do encourage you, when you're letting that personality shine, to let them see a little bit more of your hands. And this comes from olden days where in the past, if you could see someone's hands, you knew you could trust them because they weren't carrying a knife. So if there's a way for you to use some hand gestures in your shot, in the way that you set it up, make sure that you can see them. But if you do have wobbly hands, you can keep them in your lap and make sure when you are going for that drink of water, you don't wobble a little too much. Being comfortable is all about letting that personality shine. So make sure you prepare your mind and your body to make yourself feel great on the day of that big interview. If you've been invited to interview, an employer really is interested in you. Don't miss that opportunity and make sure you do our 5 steps, implement every single one so you can rock that online interview. I hope you enjoyed today's session, and please pop any comments below of hacks that you've found that help you prepare for that online interview. Thanks for joining the community. I'd love you to like or subscribe to the channel and hope you can join the jam.